Okay, good morning, everyone. Morning to everyone on TikTok and morning to everyone else watching on other platforms. Welcome to this Saturday morning show, the property show where we are going to talk this morning about landlord fire safety and really looking at tips for keeping your tenants safe and your property legal. Now, a lot of people might think, oh God, fire safety and boring, but I suppose it is. Me as a letting agent, and I know my team, obviously, it's a really important thing: fire safety, electrical safety, smoke alarms, and everything like that. And the continually changing legislation and keeping yourself right and keeping your landlords right is paramount to us, and it should be to everybody that is in the private rented sector. So I'm sure you'll agree, Jim. Obviously, been in the industry for quite some time.
Yep, landlord fire safety. It doesn't float my boat, but there's a lot of good things we're going to talk about. It's nothing to do with this at all. The one thing is, I actually got my £2,000 tax back from HMRC.
Really?
Aye, it took me 17 weeks to get it back. I'd overpaid capital gains based on their calculator, by the way, last year. And I just left it and left it and left it. And the accountant got to the end of the year and goes, "Do you realise you've overpaid in capital gains?" I went, "Well, it's their calculator." And it was £2,000 in capital gains I'd overpaid. So I tried to get through them. It took an hour to get someone, and I wasn't allowed to speak to the capital gains people. All they could do is send a message to them, take the details, and ask them to refund that money based on what I said, based on my word, believe it or not. So I could have just made something up and actually just said, "Go and give me it back," and they would have given it back, no bother. What?
That's crazy.
Is that the type of tax system we're running? It's like, just make it up and tell them a figure. And they'll give you, so they gave me it back and they gave me a wee bit of interest as well. But 17 weeks to get my money back after 6 months of, just getting round to doing it. It's like, that's shocking, isn't it? But
that's a fair amount of time.
That's the state of play with HMRC. It's like, I noticed this morning on the BBC News, actually, 99.5% debt to our income for the UK. That's what the government is borrowing just now. That's mental. That's the highest since the 1960s. Like, where's this all going to go? Where's this all going to end? It's like, it's absolutely crazy. But we'll see where we go. The reality is, you just keep going. Look, boring pays well, and I'll say it every single time. It's like, it's watching paint dry. But if you get all these things right, and landlord fire safety right, especially if you're self-managing, then everybody's looked after. You're all legally compliant, and it does pay well if you get the numbers right. Definitely. And I might talk about that on the way through, actually. Actually, I'll maybe talk about that when we get to furnished lettings.
Yeah, okay, we'll talk about that. That's closer to the end. But yeah, no, you're absolutely right, Jim. And I think, when it comes to landlord fire safety, a lot of people would think, oh God, fire safety. But do you know your tenants are more at risk from domestic fires than homeowners are in their own residential properties? And that's mainly because, like if you're doing HMOs or just in general, if you've got big families, there's more adults sharing a property. And that means there's more personal gadgets. Everybody's got electrical appliances now and things. And heavier use on appliances as well, washing machine. You hear a lot about washing machine fires and things like that as well. So there's a lot more risk there. And you need to obviously mitigate that to make sure your tenants are safe, and obviously you're safeguarding yourself as well. There's so much legislation out there and things that you really need to adhere to and make sure
you're going to jail for corporate manslaughter if you get this wrong and somebody dies. Trust me, you're going to jail as the landlord. Even though you've got a letting agent, you're legally responsible for it in the legislation, even though your letting agent's doing it for you. So therefore, if anything happens and this tenant dies and they prove it's as a result of your negligence, you are going to jail for corporate manslaughter.
And a lot of people think, oh, that'll never happen to me. Well, you'd be surprised. Thankfully, it's not something that happens often, but it can happen. And let's say, safeguard yourself as well. And as I say, admittedly, fire regulations and things, it's a really deeply kind of unsexy subject, right? But they exist to protect you, your property, and the property from obviously devastating damage. A fire, we had one recently, Jim. It wasn't a big fire, but the damage it caused. And that could leave your tenants homeless, even injured, and then you without an income. And that all comes down to poor fire safety. And it could lead to fines of up to about 30,000, and the most severe cases, like you said, Jim, criminal prosecution. So today we are going to be looking at the rules and some good practices around fire safety, and that includes the landlord's basic obligations, gas, electric and heating, communal areas, and even escape routes and things as well, smoke alarms and carbon monoxide detectors. And then, as you mentioned there, Jim, we're going to touch on furnished lettings as well. And but that will branch off into a lot of other things as we go through. But they're the main topics we're going to try and cover today. Individual local authorities can interpret some rules differently. So obviously we're here in Fife in Scotland, and we'll probably refer a lot to that. If you're watching in other parts of in other council districts or whatever, or even if you're down south or even overseas, it will differ slightly. So obviously be aware of that. But if you're interested in what the regulations are here in Fife, you could always reach out to me. My contact details are attached to this post, my email and my direct mobile number, and I'm happy to speak to anybody if they ever have any questions. But firstly, we're going to kick off and looking at a landlord's basic obligations for fire safety. And among the long list of fire regulations covering landlords and rental homes, there are a few fundamentals to get right in the beginning as a minimum standard. So first off, and obviously this all come into force, was it 2017, the EICRs? Anyway, and install the correct number of smoke alarms and carbon monoxide detectors for that type of property you're renting out, and maintain a valid certificate for gas and electrical safety. Now, for me, gas safety is paramount, but electrical safety does, it's obviously runs alongside that. We have to have electrical installation condition reports in place every 5 years for a rental property here in Scotland. But gas safety, I mean, even a way back before we started landlord registration and all the rest of it, Jim, gas safety was always in place.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. It was always in place for the very beginning. When I started all these years ago, a gas safe certificate, I think it was called by another name, Corgi. That was it. It was Corgi registered. Corgi was the thing that the agency had administered the whole lot. So they looked after everything. So definitely, yeah, it's always been in place. You have to keep certificates for up to a certain number of years, by the way, as well.
Yeah, and that's the good thing about having an agent. And I know obviously our system is predominantly digitized, but we obviously do have hard copy files and things as well. And we have the hard copy certificates. We have it all online. Do you know, it's easy accessible, because I've seen a lot of self-managed landlords and things over the years, and it's like, where's last year's certificate, or where's your valid certificate for this year? And you can't get it from them. It's and they don't know where it is. So they've not got a filing system. They've not got any organisation. And you really need
most landlords don't have it. Most landlords don't have a filing system, because most landlords just have one property. Why would you pay all attention to detail with all this legislation? I mean, it's pages and pages. It's like over 170 pieces of legislation when somebody moves in. How would you have the time to do that if you've only got one property? And you've got a full-time job? How's that going to take all your attention? It won't, but it has to, believe it or not. So if you've not got a letting agent, you're self-managing. If you're not putting at least 5 hours of continuous education into this every single month and learning as you go, but a lot more in the beginning, or you're a member of SAL, which is the Scottish Association of Landlords, if you're not a member of them and reading their information and listening to all the podcasts that are relevant that they're doing and the literature that they're doing, then you're doing yourself an injustice and you're leaving yourself wide open to exposure.
Yeah, definitely. And I think what a good thing is now, obviously, we've got letting agent registration in Scotland now. And in order for me to keep our letting registration valid, I need to do a certain number of hours of training as a bare minimum. I mean, I do more than that anyway, but to keep every time I renew that every 3 years, I need to have these hours in, or they don't let me renew it, which is a good thing, because then it's a good way of monitoring that agents are operating and they know what they're doing. To a certain level, obviously, but I mean, you should really go way beyond that if you're a professional agent. Anyway, also as well as the carbon monoxide and smoke detectors and things, if you're going to have furnishings in a property, now I'm not talking about a fully furnished property, even if you're just going to leave a sofa, it needs to have the fire safety regulation tickets on it, and that is really important. And I actually had this conversation with somebody on Thursday. And they were leaving their sofa wasn't a furnished let, but I thought I'm going to leave that. It's in good condition, and I'm like, does it have the fire tickets? And it didn't. So I'm like, you really you can't leave
So
that.
what is the fire ticket? So anybody knows what that is?
So your furnishings are supplied to meet the current fire safety regulations. So they'll all have your wee ticket on it with your wee
Your
label on it. Yep. Is it no?
and how many people cut that off? Because
Everybody cuts it off as soon as you buy it.
because it flaps about all over the place and it goes underneath and it's all over the place and it's like, I'll just cut that off, and it's like your sofa is no longer compliant for a furnished property, a furnished let, or a serviced accommodation, even though you know it's compliant, because you've cut the label off.
Yeah, I think it's got the green border, and then it's got the wee fire, and it's got the wee line shooter, and it's always
and your headboards on your beds.
Yep.
As well, if you take the tickets off the back of them, then it's no longer legally compliant. Years and years ago, I think it was 1955 and before, you were allowed to use furnishings 1955 and before. I mean, we're coming up for 70 years now, these furnishings. Yeah. A lot of them will never be here, and probably none of them left. But I used to still do a wee test. I used to take the cushion out and actually light it up with a lighter or a match, just to make sure it is, even though it was that old when I started 30 years ago. It was like, I'm going to just test this just in case. And everything was fine, but it was just my, oh, I know it's that old, and I know it's, and it was still perfectly good, but I still tested it just in case. I was always nervous about it.
Yeah. And also as well, making sure your tenants know the fire escape route. Now, if you're doing your general 2-3 bedroom house or even 1-bedroom flats, there's usually only 1 or 2 options apart from the window and things. But, and this does really revolve around maybe HMOs and things as well, where fire safety, you need fire doors, you need fire extinguishers, fire blankets in the kitchen. There's a lot that goes into HMOs because there's a lot of adults sharing one space. But make sure people know the best fire escape route, and you could conduct maybe a fire risk assessment or something to rectify any hazards that may obviously block that route or make it difficult for them to get out.
This is possibly where it comes to good, a good installer of double glazing, when they actually turn around and say, so what window are you going to keep in one of the bedrooms as your fire escape route?
Yeah.
And it's like, whoa, sorry, what are you talking about? I just wanted top hoppers in all of them. It's like, no, you can't do that. It's like one of them has to be able to open so you can actually get out, rather than just trying to go for, because if the one door is no possible to get out, then you're not getting out anywhere else unless you try and smash the window. And if you're in a panic, or you're maybe you've got disabilities or anything like that, you're not going to get that open. No, because it's the top hopper, you're not going to get out of there. So you've had it. If you go up to the first floor, that's got to be the case as well. If you go beyond the first floor, it doesn't matter, because they look on the principle that if you come out the second window, you're dead.
Yeah. And I would be surprised if the average person could fit through a hopper window. I think I used to be able to, but I can't now.
Years and years ago when we did stupid things.
I don't think I would fit through now.
But, involving drink.
Well, actually, no. I think it was a rental property that they anyway. I think we were locked out or something anyway, and I went through the window. But that was a long time ago. I've changed shapes since then. Anyway, fire safety, of course, as for me as an agent and any agent, it should be their job to really keep you safe and manage fire safety and things as well. And again, as I said, if you wanted any information on that, you could reach out to me on the contact details attached to this post. Let's move on to gas, electrics, and heating. And most fire-related injuries involve home cooking and in the kitchen and things as well. Well, faulty electrics cause about 4,000 domestic fires every year and in the whole of the UK, which is quite a lot, actually. And
I've had one in the life of the 30 years that I've been going. So one, and it was an electrical fire caused by the fridge freezer I had, and it basically gutted the whole place. Luckily, everybody was out. Everybody got out anyway, regardless. But there was an electrical fire, and that's the only time I've ever had that. The other one was a chip pan fire.
God, mind the chip.
They'd left the chip pan on top of they'd left it on the well, this is what they claim, the tenant anyway. So we don't know if it is true or no. They'd left the chip pan in the kitchen on top of the cooker, and apparently during the night their young daughter came along, maybe about 8 or 9 years old, switched on the cooker and left it, and chip pan went on fire. I doubt that, but but we just have to go on the one what they said. And it's like, I find that hard to believe. But hey, these things can happen. She might have thought, oh, I could have chips. Or maybe that's what they were feeding her on. But that was another one, definitely. So that was 189 next door to Leiden in Aberhill, and there was the electrical fire, and 258 was the chip pan fire.
Oh, was it really?
Yeah, so yeah. Aye, that's it was gutted. So 258's actually been refurbished twice.
I was just going to say, we've no luck done that one again. Yeah, anyway, so that's a prime example of how things could go wrong with domestic fires and things as well. So to combat this, there are regulations to follow, but also there's some really sound advice that you could give to your tenants and make them aware of potential hazards. So all rental properties must be tested by a registered electrician every 5 years, as I mentioned earlier. It's 3 years for HMOs in Scotland, and it needs to be by a registered gas engineer or a select, if it's electrics, a select qualified engineer. Your gas engineer needs to do a gas safety every year as well. So gas and electrical safety. Electrical's 5 years, gas is every year, and that's annually. And like I said,
and if your gas engineer, if you don't let your gas engineer in, just a wee warning for tenants, so that an observation. If you don't let your gas engineer in at some point and you don't get in touch with your letting agent or your landlord and you refuse to do that, the gas engineer has a legal obligation by Transco, which is the gas network, or Scottish Gas Networks now, maybe that's what it's called, to actually cap the meter, the gas meter, because because your house is no longer legally compliant. So their nervousness is the fact that you could be in trouble. There could be a problem, and so they cap the meter automatically. So get in touch with your letting agent or your landlord immediately if that happens. Don't just stick your head in the sand. It does happen. We've had it. Very rarely it happens, but you need to get in touch with the right people.
Yeah, definitely a good point there. Because a lot of people do just ignore it and think, well, it doesn't matter and it's not that important. And clearly it is. Also with the certificates, and this is a really important one for me as an agent, and I've noticed over the years, you must obtain the certificates for the tests that are carried out. So whether it's your electrical installation condition report, which is the EICR for electrical safety, your gas safety certificate, and give a copy to the tenant. And it should be part of their, if a new tenancy starts, to get a copy there as well. And if it's an existing tenancy, they get one as well. Do you know what I do on my system? Even though we've instructed our contractors and they say, right, that's done, and I know it's done, or if a landlord has their own contractor and they get it done, it does not get changed on our system, and the date does not get updated until I physically have it in front of me, the actual physical certificate. And that's a rule for myself and the whole team. And it's quite difficult sometimes, especially if you're managing for a landlord, and sometimes and it's fine if they want to use their own contractors, but sometimes it can be a bit difficult to obtain the actual certificate when it's not coming from their own contractor. So I think if you're a landlord and you're using an agent and you want to use your own contractor, let the agent arrange it, or be quite prompt and giving them the copy of the certificate.
You find that quite a lot, don't you? It's landlords that just want to keep their hand in. Oh, I've got my own specialist contractor that does that for me, and it's like, I'll arrange it for you. And it's like, flipping heck, this is like having a dog and barking yourself. It's like you've just paid somebody to do this for you, and you're going to be doing it yourself. Just let the letting agent do it, because it causes more problems than it actually solves. And it doesn't make it easy for the letting agent, because it makes it worse, because then they have to get onto you all the time. And then you're going, but I've got a letting agent. Why are you getting onto me all the time? Because you've organised the gas certificate. Don't organise it. Just tell them the details of the contractor you want them to use and let them get on with it.
Yeah, that's the thing. I mean, fair enough. If people want to use their own preferred contractors, fine, but let us arrange it with them directly. And the whole point in having a letting agent is so you don't get caught in the middle and be that middleman, and you could get on with your own things. It's also really good practice to alert your tenants to fire risks from their behaviour in the property as well. Things like hanging clothes to dry over electric heaters, or if you've got storage heaters and things, I've seen it happen in the past, people putting clothes over there and leaving them. That's a real big fire risk. Or like you say, Jim, in the instance of a chip pan fire, I mean, a lot of people don't have chip pans anymore. Obviously, we've probably all got air fryers, but chip pan fires or things, or fires on the hob, don't throw water over it.
I remember years and years ago, when I first started, there was this one guy. He wasn't one of my tenants. I think he was maybe somebody else's tenant, and he'd stayed in the house for a long time. But God, it was like every Friday night the fire brigade was getting called out because he used to get roaring drunk, and then he used to put the chip pan on, and then the next minute the place would go on fire. And it's like, I still see the guy walking about leaving today, and I'm thinking, I'm surprised you're not dead by now. It's like, God Almighty, have you you're even putting a cat with 9 lives to shame?
Yeah.
With the fact that you've survived this long. Honestly, it's like every single time you used to fall asleep drunk, and then something would happen, and something would go on fire in the house, and the fire brigade would never be away from his door as a result. And this is good practice to tell people what, inform people. I wouldn't say tell, inform people, your tenants, before they move in. But then again, it's picking the right tenant for the property. It's not just letting anybody and everybody go into the property. That's the key here. It's making sure you've done the right screening and the right referencing and the right spoken to the right people, and just relied on your intuition about it as well, your sixth sense about this person, and the fact that, will they make a good tenant for someone else, and be mindful of your neighbours as well, to make sure it doesn't disturb them. So these are all the things you've got to consider, and if you get all that right at the very beginning, then everything else falls into place. It's like prevention is better than cure.
Yeah, and I always say this to landlords, and especially landlords and things that I meet for the first time, the importance of that initial selection process and the referencing process, and getting that really everything right from the outset, because it just makes for such a more streamlined and pleasurable experience for us as agent, you as the landlord, tenant.
This sounds so much like common sense, but the reality is common sense just isn't that common. And so don't assume your tenant has the same knowledge as you, and then the small effort of alerting them is far preferable to the risks of actually saying nothing at all in case you might offend them. It's like flipping it. You're trying to make sure they're safe. The last thing you should be doing is worrying about if you'll offend them by saying, now make sure you've not got the chip pans, shouldn't really be using them and all the rest of it. If you've got a tenant that has a chip pan, by the way, you should maybe just consider buying them an air fryer and taking the chip pan off them.
Yeah.
They can't afford that because they've not got enough money for it, then flipping out for 30 quid or something like that to buy them an air fryer and let them use that would be perfect.
Do you know, and it's true what you say about not assuming that people have the same knowledge as you. And I sometimes, and it's quite an enjoyable thing, if you're learning all this as an agent or a self-managed landlord, if you are, and you're doing all this training and building your knowledge up, to pass that knowledge on and educate other people on, even if it is just the normal common sense things, or if it is legislation, then I kind of find it a wee bit, it's quite fun to help other people learn from what you've learned. That might just be me, but yeah. So definitely help people learn and build their knowledge, rather than, like you say, it's not telling people, it's educating. So
yeah, I've got a wee smile on my face because there's commenting, and it's like it's class. It's classic Andrea. Precision safety. Even gave me a hammer in case I crash it, in case I go into a river so I can escape out the window.
Your car, yeah.
Thank you, Andrea. I've still got it in my car. But it's like, it's worth actually running a compulsory fire safety awareness for new tenants. And it's like, you'll have everybody up my arms.
Yeah.
It's like, what about everybody else? Yeah, I could just hear all that now from all the groups the pressure groups. It's like, why is it just new tenants and all the rest of it? What about their rights? And it's like, okay. So yeah, it makes absolute sense, Andrea, but you'll be people screaming from the towers going, it's 1984 all over again. George Orwell was right.
Yeah, a good point, Andrea, but I think Jim's right. Yeah, it would probably cause a wee bit of stuff.
Communal. So what communals then? Communal areas and escape routes. So let's talk about that. This is just all about planning. I remember when I actually had when I bought my office, I've still got it. One of the offices down at Caledonian House is our head office. And the beauticians is in there, and I've got all my stuff in the back as well in a separate unit. But I remember when I came in there, and someone decided to come down and do a fire assessment, and I was like, okay, we could have an office in here. And they were like, whoa. He says, where's your escape routes? And I'm like, okay, What do you mean escape routes? Well, if you've got the front door and the fire goes on in the front door, then you can't get out. There's nowhere else to get out. You're stuck. There's no windows or anything like
The
that.
original
And then I
windows.
thought to myself,
Yeah.
oh, for God's sake, if I'll tell you what, there's only going to be about 3 people in here at any one point in time. At that point in time, there's only 3 people. And if a fire starts, we'll just step over it and go out the front door. And we've got fire extinguishers to put it out.
Yeah.
So it's no the end of the world. It's not as if somebody's going to, you know, going to do something different, or it's going to suddenly burst into flames. And it's like, it's no the Rock, and it's no the Tower of Inferno here. I was right, because I had somebody in the fire crew actually come along and say, yeah, risk analysis, you're fine. You're fine. You're okay. It's okay. As long as you do that, and that, you're fine. You don't need to create another door somewhere. So, and then I worked out, it was this guy just trying to sell me more product. Yeah. That's what it was all about, really. So you used to get that, didn't you? When you had the fire assessment officers, or the pretend ones, were trying to sell you the fire safety stuff, and they would come in with a high-vis vest into your office and go, did you realise that and that's wrong? And you go, oh, official. It's like, they're not even official. They're just a salesman trying to sell you something. And that's what I always recognised about it. So just watch out for that anyway. But escape routes and that, what can we do about this? Communal areas, escape routes, these are things we've got to take into account, because it involves other people and other tenancies or owner occupiers.
Yeah, definitely, especially in like blocks of flats or apartments, or indeed HMOs. And given the extra people that live in HMOs and things, for example, it's little wonder that fire regulations are even stricter, as I mentioned earlier, to ensure the maximum safety for every tenant that lives in the building. And the main rules around the HMO is in all HMOs, every individual let room must be fitted with a fire door. I mentioned that earlier as well, along with other higher risk spaces like the kitchen. Kitchens are shared and they're quite high traffic areas, and any other room containing, say, the boiler or things as well. So these all, I mean, there's a lot of more fire safety regulations in an HMO.
Now, just beware when you talk about fire doors, Richard. It's not any fire door. It has to be a fire door that has a certain amount of time before the fire actually gets into the room. In other words, I'll give you an example. Some fire doors are designed to last 30 minutes before any fire breaches the door. Some are designed to last an hour, and it all just depends. So based on the legislation you need to comply with, just double check with the right people, the specialists in this, what type of fire door you need for your property, rather than just run out and buy the first fire door that you see, because it's just got fire door written on it.
Yeah, I think they've all got different burn through times as well. But fire doors must have the intermittent strip. They must automatically have the automatic closing device, so they close shut behind. Be fire resistant for 30 minutes minimum. So that's what I say about the burn through time. And have nothing screwed or nailed into them, as it weakens their performance.
So this strip is designed to actually, when it hits heat, it expands and seals the door when heat goes into it. So it's in the outer perimeter of the door itself, and it just expands and it seals the door, and it stops fire coming in or smoke coming in as well. That's what that's designed to do when the heat hits it. And you're right, the automatic closing system as well. For certain, it's basically, most people will see it, and I tell you what, it's been done a lot in a lot of houses. They take off the wee hinge. It's got the wee chain. It actually automatically closes the door at the back here. A lot of people actually unscrew these and take these out, when you shouldn't be doing that at all, because the door should close automatically once you've been through it, for your own protection.
Yeah, definitely. And the fire doors are such an important thing, especially obviously in the HMO setup. Communal halls and stairs and landings should be kept free of obstructions, and escape routes should be clearly pointed out to the tenants at the beginning of their tenancy. And HMOs, you should also have the fire exit signs and things as well. But even in, like I said, flats and apartments as well, your ones at Mill Street, I think one time.
That's the very ones I was thinking about. There's a real... we've got there's a partition between that and the hallway itself, and then you go in and you've got the fire shaft that opens up automatically and lets the smoke dissipate into through the roof space as a result. So the emergency shaft. But a lot of people actually think they're okay to put all their boxes and everything outside, and their bikes and stuff and their boots outside their front doors because it's inside that partition for some reason. And it's like, no, that partition's there to protect you for fire.
Yeah, we've had to pick people up over the years about stuff outside the doors and things because it blocks the exit routes and basically ultimately the fire escape route.
This is why you see, for example, when you're in festivals, Glastonbury was a classic example. It's like, you know, the camper vans all plough into the field and they're all camping next to each other. And the next minute, the fire warden's coming along and is going, you're going to have to move yours back. And they're going, well, why? And it's like, because we've got to be able to get a car, a fire truck, right through you lot to get to the other side if somebody has a fire in their camper van. So you have to take your awning or whatever it is you've put out there on your camper van, and you have to bring that back in. You have to take your portable toilet and put it back on your bit. And a lot of them stand there arguing with them. It's like, flipping heck, just throw them off the site.
Another good point as well is if everybody's pitched too close to each other, if one person, say one camper van or something was to go up on fire, I'll just rip right through them all. You know, there's not going to be any buffer to stop that.
So that's why it's important to have these communal halls and stairs and landings, as you said, free from all these obstructions. It may seem a little bit overboard, but I tell you what, if it does happen, somebody dies.
Yeah.
That's effectively what happened. So can you afford to take that risk if that happened? That's why you need to keep all these communal areas clear and free of debris.
Yeah, definitely. And with the HMOs as well, the rules get stricter for HMOs with 3 or more floors as well. So, do you know, if you've got like a townhouse, we've got one we've done. I didn't do it as an HMO, but it was formerly an HMO in St Andrews, and it was the 3 levels. And I know all the measures that were in place for that while it was an HMO. So yeah, but if you want any clarity on any of the information surrounding what we're talking about, again, obviously my contact details are in the post if you want to reach out.
Smoke alarms and CO2 detectors, which are essential. There's a lot of ambiguity and confusion about what smoke alarms and heat detectors, because they're different, and CO2 detectors you need and where you need them and when you need them. So let's clarify that. Yeah.
So being overcome by gas and smoke is one of the most common fire-related fatalities. So, and it's accounting for about 1/3 of deaths. So working smoke alarms save lives, and there's no other way around it, and that is fact. So here's the rules to follow. Smoke alarms must be fitted on every floor of the accommodation and the rental property. In HMOs, it's required. The requirement extends to each rented bedroom. That's only in HMOs for the bedroom, along with the shared living rooms and kitchen areas.
That's actually quite surprising. But when you think about an HMO, you probably will be cooking in your bedroom.
Well, sometimes they might have a toaster, they might have a microwave, kettle, you know, these things. Just like
so I can understand how that is. It's almost like a hotel. It's almost like a Premier Inn, the HMO setup. When you think about that, so you mean by every floor in accommodation, you mean the hallways?
So say let's take a 2-3 bedroom semi-detached house, for example. You need to have a smoke alarm in the lower hall. You need to have a heat detector in the kitchen. You need to have a smoke alarm in the main living area, which would be the living room. You need to have another smoke alarm in the upper hall and a carbon monoxide detector next to your boiler, not in the cupboard with the boiler. It needs to be outside. There's a certain distance, so if whoever's installing it will do that correctly. And also, if you have a gas fire or something, you might have to have an additional one in the reception room.
Within 1 meter.
Yeah, within 1 meter, I think it was. Yeah.
So, but, a lot. Most hobs are actually designed for that built into them. But the older style hobs, you still have to have that, don't you?
Yeah. The new hobs, I've got one of the new hobs, and they turn themselves off, they shut off and things.
So essentially, what we're looking at is a smoke detector on every floor. And I'll say it in a different way to what you've done, because it's exactly the same way you've done it. A smoke detector on every floor, and then a smoke detector in every reception room except the bedrooms, and then a heat detector, not a smoke detector, in every kitchen. Because you might have more than. I've just been out to a 4th Street one. I mean, it's a sale property, but it does have 2 kitchens, so you'd have to have 2, and they have to be interlinked with each other. So when one goes off, they all go off.
Yeah. Now, and originally it was hardwired, and they all needed to be linked through hardwire. They don't need to be anymore, as long as they're all remotely connected and they have a long life lithium battery.
Which is typically sealed for 10 years, and then you
Yes.
have to just throw the detector away now after 10 years. You can't actually tamper it. You can't take it out and take the battery out and put another one in. It's just like it's a sealed unit for the 10-year period.
Yeah, and although it's a sealed unit, I mean, some of the newer ones, but some of the older ones that are hardwired, which are still obviously in their 10-year period and things, they have a backup battery, a lot of them. So if there's a power cut, then they still have the battery for them to be able to work.
Yeah, which
now,
is what I've got.
Yeah, the battery
I've
over
got that.
time will run out, and the smoke alarm beeps intermittently to tell you that
I
the
then
battery.
realised that because my whole house was hardwired like this in the very beginning, about 20 years ago. But then I realised that the battery in the kitchen kept beeping, and I was like, "What's going on?" And then I realised it wasn't hardwired; it was actually just a battery interlinked with the rest of them. So it's still, for me personally, there's no legal. Well, there is a legal requirement now, isn't there? Yeah, due to the Scottish government brought that in, didn't they? So I am legally compliant, although for a homeowner, it's supposed to be legally compliant, but nobody actually really enforces it. And even the insurance companies kind of said, well, we're not really bothered, just get it done at some point in time. If you do have a claim, we'll not really hold that against you. And I'm like, well, what was the point of putting the legislation in place then?
I always thought as well it would come into play that obviously when they brought this in, I thought, right, okay, when we're selling properties now, they're going to insist that we have all the proper smoke alarms in place.
Nobody bothers. Nobody bats an eyelid. And I think that's ridiculous. The fact that they spent all that money and all that time legislating for this and nothing's been done about it at all.
Yeah,
I'm surprised that Exchequer hasn't done anything about it. Because I think at one point in time, we estimated how many houses were in the whole of Britain, Bob Terrace and I. We estimated how many houses were in the whole of Britain, and then we estimated how many smoke alarms on average you'd need for each house, and then we estimated the VAT receipts you would generate as a result of that to the Exchequer, and it was like, oh, it was a horrendous amount of money. So there was Exchequer would be get a nice wee ching about all the VAT receipts on all the VAT on all these smoke detectors getting installed. So, and then I scratched my head and thought, I wonder if they do that just to raise tax and revenue. Because then when you think about all the jobs that would be created as a result of that and all the businesses that would be created as well, just because that's enforced, then it's a good thing to keep everybody in work.
Yeah, definitely. It creates jobs and obviously, like you say, it could be a way to generate extra tax. But anyway, carbon monoxide detectors. Now, carbon monoxide is an important one, and they must be installed in any room that has a solid fuel appliance like the coal fire, wood burning stove, your boiler as well, like we spoke about, and not inside the boiler cupboard. Now, all alarms.
It's quite interesting you said about the carbon monoxide detector. It's the silent killer, carbon monoxide, because
it's more common. I mean, it's not something that happens a lot. But
I had it once.
You hear about
it? We had it. Yeah, we had it. And what it was the installer at the time had actually put too short a flue on the going through the roof. And therefore what was happening is the wind was catching it and blowing it back down the actual pipe, and then into the actual room itself through the cupboard. And the cupboard it was in had vents on it, and it was coming through there. And I was like nauseous and sick, and it was like, God, it's like, oh my God, I just feel sick all the time. And it's like, that's what happened. And it was just by chance. And this is lucky when you see how easy this could happen. This was lucky because we actually had the fire brigade come round and they used to give out these wee carbon monoxide detector stickers. On your boiler. And when I put it on, it turned black. And that was the sign to show you it was carbon monoxide in the area and in the room itself and in the cupboard. And it's like, and I phoned up the installer who installed it years before, not for me, but for the previous owner. And he went, oh, I'm sorry about that. And they came and installed another bit on it. And I was like, oh my God. So I would have been dead if I hadn't actually taken some provision to this, or even worse, maybe well, maybe I'm affected in the brain somehow. Some people would argue that point, wouldn't they? And that's maybe the case. That could explain a lot. But you know, joking aside, it's like, you know,
Yeah.
this could have been a different story. It could never have happened, and I might not been here because of that. You know, middle of the night it comes on, and even when Tony, my daughter, she was a baby and she was in the other room, just almost next door to that cupboard, so you know that could have affected her as well eventually. So it was lucky we actually was vigilant enough, and actually I was vigilant enough to actually think, you know, what's causing this, because it's like this shouldn't be happening.
I remember though, it's like those wee white cards and the wee circle. It was like sandpaper in the middle.
Yeah, wee crystals on it. Yeah, and
Yeah.
that just turned black straight away, and it told you it was carbon monoxide.
Yeah. And that's a
Saved my life. Just
Yep.
that wee thing saved my life.
Yeah. So carbon monoxide safety and things is very important. Now, all alarms and detectors must be tested on the day of the tenancy starting. Now, luckily, we have the inventory clerk who does this for us, because he goes in the day or two, just the day before, to do all the inventory, and he tests all the alarms and notes it all in the inventory, which is really handy for us.
I'm looking aside and I'm thinking, where's the, you know, if I've got a pole, because that's what you do. If you kind of get up to it and you've not got ladders, you just take the pole and press the button. And then if the button goes off and you hear all the other detectors going off, then job's done.
And it's easy enough done. And on the day of the tenancy, it should be done. And like you say, you push one, they should all go off together. And that's quite good. It's quite good practice. It's good practice to do that.
So the advice for the tenants is, if it keeps going off, then get in touch with your landlord or your letting agent, tells them it keeps going off. Do not sit and batter at it so it stops, because then it's there to save your life. It's going off for a reason, and it's very rare to have faults in them. So it's going off for a reason. So just contact your letting agent or your landlord to make sure you're safe.
Yeah, don't just disconnect them or knock them off the roof and the ceiling and leave them. And as a landlord and as an agent and things, you must repair or replace smoke and carbon monoxide alarms as soon as you know they're at fault. And there's quite a lot of useful tips and things. There's a wee booklet you could download from the government website. I've stuck the link in the post as well.
Yeah.
If you want to click through and have a wee read of that.
Furnished lettings. This is the one for me. It's like, God, I used to deal with furniture a lot. I used to deal with furniture in every single house. I used to furnish everything. I used to provide forks, knives, plates, cups, bed linen, beds, sofas, you name it, towels. I used to provide the whole lot as a furnished property. Little did I know that's kind of serviced accommodation now, isn't it?
Yeah.
But that's what I used to do, because the tax advantages of providing that were very, very lucrative at the time. Now, I don't do it at all. Yeah, I don't do it at all, because literally a lot of people were beginning to turn up and they were going, well, I don't need all that stuff. And plus the fact, I'll be honest, the furnished lettings thing was attracting the wrong type of tenant for me. It was attracting the type of tenant who would be quite transient, so that it'd be easy for them to leave and go, and maybe antisocial because of that. I'm not saying that will happen all the time, but for me personally, that's what was happening. We're getting antisocial tenants. We didn't realize at the time. Remember, it was a Wild West when I started 30 years ago. There was no professionalism in the market, and it was like the blind leading the blind at that point in time, because no one knew what they were doing, and no one really collaborated with anybody as landlords. There was no investor clubs or investor meetings or landlord associations. There was nothing like that at all when I first started. So we had to invent all that stuff and blaze that trail and professionalize the landlord, being a landlord, and what it meant to be a landlord, and what your responsibilities were as a landlord, in conjunction with the local authority, and also in conjunction with the Scottish government and the UK government through what was the UK, the National Landlord Association, which I was chairman for Scotland, which was the biggest landlord association body in the whole of the UK. At the time. So that's how we professionalized the circuit. So yeah, furnished lettings wasn't easy, and it's no for the faint-hearted, and it costs a lot of money.
There's a lot more involved with dealing with furniture.
Especially if you've not got somebody that's able to reimburse you for any of the damage that they do.
Yeah, and that's what, like you say, there's a lot more involved right for the outset. As soon as, if you've got a furnished let, your inventory needs to include all of that, your condition report, everything meticulously noted, and its condition, and like, do you know, if you've got right down to cutlery and things like you were saying, it all has to go in there. So from the very beginning, and then when you're doing the checkout, it's like you have to go through all that again, and then do you know what, throughout the tenancy, you have the upkeep and the maintenance or the replacement of anything that's in there. So, I mean, most landlords let their properties empty, and that's kind of the general consensus now. Unless you're in some areas like East Nuke and things, it is a wee bit more common because it's kind of holiday let territory and things cross over for serviced to residential things. But if yours includes furnishings, perhaps you're renting out maybe your own home for a short period of time while you go working for a few years or something, or you operate maybe student lets, HMOs and things, there are strict regulations that you need to follow. Now, any upholstered furnishings manufactured after 1950, I think you were saying that earlier, Jim, from sofas, dining chairs to mattresses, headboards, you pointed that out, Jim, these fabric headboards and things, must comply with the current fire safety regulations and have that fire ticket that we were talking about earlier attached to it. So that's really important, and if they don't, they can't be included in your let.
Yeah, so don't cut them off when you buy them if you're intending maybe using them later on. It was a real good trick for a lot of landlords in the early days to, like, if you were going to have to get something new for a rental property, it's like, well, I'll just get something new for my own and I'll give them mine. That was very commonplace. A typical example was things like washing machines and fridge freezers. It's like, well, I'm needing to get a new fridge freezer or a washing machine. I'll just give them mine and I'll get a new one for myself, and it'll be instantly tax deductible. Woohoo!
Yeah, that's a good way of doing that. Yeah, and we talk about the fire safety tickets and things. So every qualifying item that I've like, and the ones that I've just run through there and others, they must display this item that shows it meets the BS 7177 British Fire Safety Standard. So, so remember, don't cut them off, and tell your tenants not to cut them off as well.
And what's the repercussions if you end up doing something like this? If you end up having something it's not got the fire certificate on it or fire ticket on it, you've cut off because it just didn't. It seemed unsightly. It's like cutting off the label on your t-shirts and that, isn't it?
Yeah.
And that's what people do on their furniture, as I said before, and even their headboards and stuff, because it's unsightly, and it gets in the way, and they think, oh, I'll just take that off, and it's like, well, you've nailed it, you've ruined it. So what could be the repercussions then if you do that, and then somebody picks up on that, like the local authority when they do a check for landlord registration, and then they say to you, could you send me about 10 of your properties, a sample of 10 of your properties, and they pick the sample. And they say, send me all the certificates that you've got for electricity, for gas, for Legionella, for what else have they got? Oh God, there's other things, lead pipe and testing and all the rest of it.
Legionella, fire safety. You also have.
And then if you're doing furnishings, it's like, I tell you what, we'll come and visit some of them.
Yeah, and people might think that never happens, but you will be surprised. They do audit. They do carry out audits, and not just on like new applications for registration and things. Now they do it on existing registrations as well, and I think they do around about 10% every year.
So if you're non-compliant, what could happen?
So each item that you have that's maybe non-compliant furniture, and you might just think, oh, it's just a furniture ticket. It carries a £5,000 fine, which will also almost certainly invalidate your buildings and contents insurance and your landlord's insurance in the event of a fire. So if you have a fire and it's related to that, then you're stuck there without.
I doubt very much. I doubt very much whether the fire brigade's going to go. You didn't have a ticket on your sofa when your sofa's been burnt.
I do think that, but then there might be ways and means that they could ascertain whether things were compliant or not from the outset.
Well, if a loss adjuster really had any savvy and really wanted to go to town because they suspected something was wrong, then they would say, I tell you what, give me the receipts of the stuff when you bought them.
Mm-hmm.
So they knew where you bought it from. And if you can't produce these receipts, then possibly there's a ambiguity over this. Yeah. Then the loss adjuster might actually turn around to the insurance company and recommend that you don't pay out for that very reason.
That's another reason why you should really be quite meticulous with your record keeping as well. Right down to your purchase receipts and things for things that you've bought.
Yeah.
You're looking around at your records.
Aye, I'm looking at all my records. It's like I've got piles and piles of this. And by the way, if anybody talks about fire safety, Andrea, if you're listening, yes, it's all legally compliant. And I've got a risk assessment done on it already. So we're okay.
Yeah. But yeah, and like I say, when it comes to furnished lets and things, from our experience, for the most part now, obviously, beyond that time, obviously when you started out, Jim, and things, most long-term tenants prefer to have their own furniture now. Even in some HMOs and things, I know obviously HMOs provide study desks and things if it's students and whatever, but they like to bring their own stuff to create that sense of their own home and make it their own home, which is a good thing because then that shows their commitment to stay longer in the property, and that's ultimately what you want as medium to long-term tenancies, to be honest. Which makes unfurnished lettings the simplest and often the most popular route to go down.
Route. Yeah, I would say so. I mean, unfurnished for me every single time. And when I say unfurnished, remember, you've probably got the oven hob extractor inbuilt into the kitchen anyway, because most kitchens come like that. So I still put stainless steel oven hob and extractor into every single kitchen. I leave a space for the washing machine under the drainer of the sink, and then also because it's a dead area really.
Yeah.
So that's where it should go, because that's where all the waste and everything is at your sink as well, in the water. And then I leave a space for a freestanding fridge freezer with no restrictions. Usually you could probably easily get a 2 meter one there, 50-50 split, if that's what you're looking for. Or you can just put a box over the top that you can take away, a 600 ml cabinet over the top of it if you want to restrict it. And then somebody could just take that away if they've got a bigger family and they need a bigger fridge freezer for that reason. So that's an easy way to set out a kitchen in an ergonomic fashion in order so it's efficient for the tenant, but it's also presentable and it's minimal disruption and cost to you as a landlord or an investor.
Yeah, definitely.
People don't think about that. They just put belts and braces and pelmets and all the rest of it and coving on the top of their kitchens and the bottoms of the cabinets, and it's like that almost doubles the price. It's like, you're not going to get any return on investment back on that. Let's be honest. It's like, so why would you then put another £2,000 into it just to make it look, a bit nicer? And it's like, the kitchens are beautiful as they are. Why do you need all that fluff? It's just, it's not necessary, I would say.
We had that recently with one of yours, and it's like, I know what your setup for most kitchens is the L shape, like you say, integrated oven hob extractor space for the washing machine. And our contractor was trying to be a wee bit creative and this and that, and it's like, no,
I didn't reinvent the wheel here.
Yeah.
But we know this works every single time. We know it works, and they were trying to put another bit over the side so they can have a wee thing there. And it's like, no, you need to leave that as a lot of space. So if somebody wants to put a table and chairs in there, they can. You don't need. It's like, how many more cupboards do you need in a 1-bedroom flat?
And we needed space for the radiator and things as well, anyway. So.
But it's how many cupboards do you need more in a 1-bedroom flat? You've already got an array. You've got a 1,000 double cupboard with drawers. You've got your oven, then you've got a corner unit, and then you've got your under sink unit, and then you've got 1,000 at the top and 1,000 at the top at other side of each side of the extractor with a 600 above it. And that's only a 1-bedroom flat. It's like, you don't need cupboards over the other side of the kitchen. It's like, make that, just skim that, plasterboard that off, skim it, and put a radiator on it as well behind the door as it opens. And then also what to do as well is put a plug there. So somebody could, if they've got something, they could have it over there as well. They'll have the choice to do that. But remember, and put a plug so it's behind the fridge freezer as well, or possibly put it on the wall so you can have an isolator switch to switch it off and on. So you can get to it without actually having to take it out. And the same applies to your washing machine. Make sure the switch goes inside the under sink, so it's against there, so you can switch it off and on without actually having to take the washing machine out and in, or maybe an isolator switch at the top of the worktop that you can do that as well from.
And that's what I mean. And after doing it for years, that's just second nature to how you think, and obviously, and how we think, obviously, about doing the kitchens. And it's funny how people don't look at it the same way. But
yeah, they've all got their own ideas. They want to be creative. It's like, I'm not in the business of being creative here. I'm in the business of generating income and wealth. It's like, that's what I'm in. It's like, it's McDonald's is in the business of selling you hamburgers. That's what their franchisees are in the business of. McDonald's are in the business of real estate. They own every piece of real estate they've got, the McDonald's places, and they rent it out to their franchisees who pay them an income as a result of that. And that's how McDonald's make their money. they don't really make their money off the burgers. That's the franchisees that make it. So this is the business I'm in. I'm in the business of real estate. I'm in the business of people. I'm in a people business. If you provide people with the right service and the right product, then you're on a winner every single time. They'll stay with you for as long as possible. They'll probably pay the best. I wouldn't say the highest rents, because I'm not a big fan of, we've got to squeeze every last drop out of this. Because you want the people to be comfortable and be able to live and actually just think, you know, this is a great option for me, and it gives me no obligation being tied to a mortgage and actually having to repair a house continuously all the time and have unexpected bills that I'm not planning for. I've got one rent I pay every single month. That's my budget, and I don't need to pay anything else out if I don't want to.
Yeah, and that's the best model for obviously you've proved to follow. I know people do things differently, and that's fine, but
well, they're wrong, aren't they? Let's be honest, they're wrong. They just don't know they're wrong yet.
Yeah, and they'll learn that obviously the difficult way, which is obviously a waste of time and money.
Of course.
Anyway, I think to round up today is the question you should all ask yourself after listening to what we've spoke about today is your rental property fire safe?
Yeah, definitely.
So given the risks to your property, the personal safety of your tenant, and obviously the penalties for landlords who fall short of fire safety regulations, you can never be too informed of your legal obligations. So hopefully what we've covered today has been really helpful. As I've said throughout, if there's anything you want to ask or get information on that we've covered today, then please reach out to me. My contact details are in the post attached, and it's got my direct mobile number, and of course my email is there as well. Feel free to do that if you are interested in discussing anything. And that's it for today.
My final thought on it, Richard, as I said before, and I've said in the comments, if you're a landlord or an investor, you need to hear this. You need to go over this. If you're just tuning in for the first time, you need to go over this, because if you get it wrong, and if your letting agent gets it wrong, you're still the one that goes to jail for corporate manslaughter if your tenant dies because of your negligence or their negligence to the health and safety in your property.
Yeah, and that's a good way to draw that to a close, Jim. That's very important.
On a cheery note.
On a cheery note. Well, I'll finish on a wee bit of cheery note. We are here on Monday, 12:30, the Wealth Creation Show. We are discussing building the foundations, so that'll be a good one. Tune in, join us then live 12:30 on Monday. And until then, I will see you later. And thanks for joining, Jim. That was a good discussion this morning. Thanks very much.
You're welcome.